To stay abroad or to move back after your education? To come here and remain and get a life, or to go back and start afresh in your country, especially if you're African? This is a debate that we can have for the next few months and still not come to an agreement. But I'm going to take today 3 examples of people I personally knew who came to the UK the same time like I did, about 2004, 2005. And I'll share some very, very interesting points. Somebody who came here and came here only to study. She came to do a master's in human resource management and had one focus: to go back home. There was never any doubt, and I'll share why she was very, very intentional about coming to study and go back to Africa. The second example will be somebody who came here and she said to me once that I can never go back to Africa. I said, why? She said, because for a start, I don't think that I can cut carrots and green beans to cook like jollof or fried rice, or to cook it in my food. I'm so used to this frozen peas, carrots, and whatever you want ready in the shops. I could never live in Africa. I can never forget that particular day when she shared that with me. We're in the train station waiting to pick up somebody coming from Africa. And it stuck in my mind. And with a very, very, very twist of faith, she found herself having to go back by no choice of hers about a year after that. And there's a third example of somebody who moved back after coming to study and be a teacher, and again was forced to move back. She had no reservations going back. She kept an open mind from the beginning, but she was forced due to immigration issues to go back. Just the thoughts of you going back to give back to your country, maybe to develop it or to, settle back there, it just shows that you love where you come from, and congrats. I'll say this every time, that if you can take that bold step and it works, there's 2 things that does. You feel good working in your country and developing it in any aspect. But the reason why these 3 examples are important is because there are certain things beyond our control when you're moving back home to Africa. I have started a business across 2 continents. I've had a business in the UK, which was thriving during post-COVID, 2 different sorts of businesses, and I'm still into entrepreneurship now at a less degree. But I'm looking to have my big plunge in the next few months, God willing. And I've also had a business back home, a consultancy, which has given me some good income as well. But there's always been the restrictions that I cannot control. The first example I talked about, and I'll share, is I had a friend. She was like a sister to me, and I'm sure she'll never come across this video, but you never know how these videos travel nowadays. She came here. We came, I think, 3 weeks apart. She was from a lot of privilege, and I can say this without any reservations. Her family were big politicians, and her dad paid her fees. She came here. She never worked. I remember when I was working, we were very close. She would come and spend weekends with me, and I'll have to leave her and go to work like most of us have to do. We have to graft hard for a living, and I'll joke, I'm like, oh God, how the other half live? And she'll laugh. And she was very, very nice, very lovely woman, very lovely girl. It wasn't her fault growing up in that environment. And she came. She was so focused that during holidays, when we were trying to gather all the shifts in the world, she went and learned a new language. She learned French. She actually went to France for 3 months just to learn French. And I thought, my God, this is dedication. This is somebody with a purpose. And it was because her life was almost planned for her. But I did not know this. I was naive at the time. I knew that she would probably not end in the same place like me. These fingers are not equal, are they? I knew that from the beginning. And as soon as her graduation, she attended my graduation actually, and she graduated and moved back very, very fast. I remember when I went home with my son, when I'd been here for 4 years, she really settled. and she was, working. She had a very decent HR job. And a few months after working in a top company that was kind of given to her almost because of virtue of who her dad is or was, she got an international job, and now she's flying so big in some African country. And I keep wanting to visit her. She's just in a very good place. Okay, without wanting to compare, I'm just giving you guys scenarios so you can judge for yourself what the right thing to do might or might not be. Then we have another case of a friend who I look a bit further because I realized I was straining my back, so I decided to relax my back. I hope I'm not too far from the camera. I hope you can still see me. Anyway, I have another friend who I talked about her at the beginning, that she came here at the same time like me. We all came to study. She studied and she was working. She was integrated very quickly. She'd always said that I love the UK. I cannot go back to Africa. My God, the suffering, the stress, family, commitment, poverty. I cannot even begin to imagine my life there. And I can tell you, she said to me that I don't want to ever go back. She talked about something so basic like how cooking is so easy here. There's always power, electricity. She did not come from privilege like friend A. I'll call her friend A. She came from a very modest background and she had to graft hard. Because of that, she made it clear that she'll want to settle here, get married and have kids. At that point, I did not know what I wanted. I came from okay background back home. I could always go back and have a job. I had people who would get me something decent to do. But I also found the UK okay, interesting, different, and I thought the opportunities were here. However, without talking much about what happened to this lady, she was almost forced to leave because of some unfortunate things that happened in her life after she got married. And she got married back home, and she was planning to bring her husband because she'd always made it clear that she was going to come back and settle. She came back here and things did not go so well, and she was literally forced to go back overnight. She did not tell me this, but after the conversation I had with her, after she'd been here for just a year and how settled she was, how happy she had plans, she talked about buying a place, she was moving very fast paced. I knew that that would be a difficult thing for her, and we never talked about it. She moved back, out of her control, met her husband, and she was making progress. She just to show that she was pushful and she was going to make it anywhere in the world. Didn't matter if she was in the UK or in Africa. Admire her strength. Despite the fact that things happened so quickly for her, she carried on and she would work so hard. Unfortunately, one day her husband was traveling and she was actually abroad when this happened. She went to buy some goods and he was involved in an accident, a drastic car accident, which I'll talk about that later, what I think. And unfortunately, he passed on. It was the most tragic news ever because I had seen them a few months before that. They came and visited me when I went back home, visited my mom because my mom knew him and her. They were a beautiful and loving couple. I have never seen any love like that till today. She loved this man with everything in her body, and he passed on only a year and a half or 2 years after being married. And nobody knew she was going to survive it because she was so smitten, and she started her life again. When I remember how she talked about wanting to settle here because of the living standards, the facilities that the country offered, things like light, power, good roads, electricity, healthcare. I remember that if maybe she was not forced to go back, her husband might not have passed. He might have, he might not have, because the roads, the number of deaths that has occurred due to our bad roads, speeding, just the roads themselves that are not good. And after people have accidents that could be very, very minor, they end up not making their lives because of lack of good health care. So there are a few things that could have been avoided, and she lost him. Fast forward to maybe we're talking now 14, 15 years ago. She's an established businesswoman. She took the bull by the horn and found herself where she is today, one of the biggest, most known brands back home who is making things happen. She is living, I don't think she'll ever want to live in the UK ever again. Now, let's talk about C. C was from very modest beginnings as well. Okay, C came here to study, went into teaching because she loved teaching. And somehow she was forced to go back again back then because her papers were not regularized at the right time. And we're all like, oh my God, you just spend money doing this 3 years PGC. Then we had this PGCE thing where you can get like an access course and become a teacher. She was very intelligent. She had some few health challenges, but she went back. I was worried because I was again very close to her. And she discovered, my battery is low, I'm going to change it and I'll be right back in a minute. I really hope that I can remember where I ended before my battery went low. I think I've been filming a lot today back to back. Anyway, so she went back and she struggled to find work because she was not from privilege. She tried everything possible, she lived, she was struggled, she could not afford the most basic things. She had a child. Before she came here, she could not even pay the child's fees. It was so bad. And then the pressure from her family looking at her like a failure, that led her to look for a way, and she went to the US. And she's making it okay in the US now. And I'm setting these 3 examples to say to you guys that I look at myself now at the 4th equation. Who chose to stay? I chose to stay because, one, I had a partner. For those of you who don't know and you've not watched my first video, which was dramatic, and I'm going to pin that here, where I shared my life. I shared how I found myself where I did and how I felt like a failure when I turned 40 last year. I already had a partner here. I met him, and our story is something that I promised to share, which maybe I will in due course. And one of the reasons why I came here, my education, was him. So, but I have to make this point that when I met him, the first thing he said to me is, why did I meet you when I'm on my way out of the country? Because he had been here for, at that point, over 10 years. We're talking now 20 years ago plus, and he was ready to move back. But because we met, we had kids, I kind of sucked the zeal out of him. And I can say this if he ever falls across one of my videos, because he doesn't watch my channel deliberately, because this channel was born out of frustration. It was a place for me to share my heart out if I was stressed and I was going through a difficult time. I can say a bit of midlife crisis. And he stayed against his will, I'll say, because of maybe love, because of family. And this is one thing a lot of couples face. One person wants to go back, mostly the men, most times. I don't know why. And sometimes it either causes people to break up and split naturally, or one person stays out against the will almost because of circumstances or happenstance. So I stayed, and I was, we got married early on. I became British and we made a family, and we're together. We tried to make it work. But one thing I want to say is I have had a plethora of emails, of lovely messages after my last video of thinking I was a loser. People saying there's no right way, there's no wrong way, just what I've achieved in life is good enough. But that was not the point, and I want to make this clear that when I put my camera up to share some of these thoughts I have, it's not necessarily pointing at me. It's taking a sample size of people I know who feel the same way like me, but don't have the guts or the nerves to put their cameras up. And what I do, I'm a medium to get people's ideas, what has worked, advice, feedback, and share to the masses who watch me and my growing community. So I am just saying in this example that the thing that I'll point to, and the reason why a lot of Africans have been sold this dream that the only way to succeed is because most of us come from countries which don't function. I don't want this video to be political. I don't want this channel to have a political touch to it, but we cannot pretend or avoid the truth. There is the fact that most African countries are almost non-functional. There is corruption at the top. If you know somebody, you get a good job. If you don't, you might not. And I'm going to share you guys my experience when I moved back after being here for 3.5, 4 years, how that went. And God, this is very interesting because that's when I kind of got into a glimpse of how frustrating it could be, or how easy it could be if you knew or didn't know the right people. And let's be honest, most of us leave because we don't have jobs. The employment rates are so low. The only way you can make it is if you come from wealth. Perhaps you have family businesses handed down. You might also get lucky being hardworking and get a good business if you stay in the right books and you just find yourself the right business to go with. Or you get a good job like an expert after coming here, working and studying. You can get a job genuinely without going through anybody. But the numbers are very low because, like it or not, even in those African countries, they'll rather employ people who don't look like us. There are times that I've gone for an interview once with a Caucasian man in a company in Africa, and he was offered the job, although our qualifications matched, because there is still that neo-colonialism and the feeling that we are inferior. And I just smiled. I said, oh my God, if it was here, I don't think that would be the case, except you're feeling a number because of equality. So our countries have failed us so bad. We don't have access to good roads. People will lose their lives like there's nothing. There is no security. There's constant stories of theft, kidnapping, armed robbery, deaths. There is no way that education is accessible to everybody. Yes, there are government institutions that are below standards because they don't get paid well, so they don't really give back like they're meant to. They have the private schools here and there, so that's another thing lacking. And the worst is health care. It's the thing that you walk into a hospital with your 2 feet, and then you don't leave. You live in a body bag because they don't actually struggle to save lives. So there are things that are beyond our control, and it goes more systemic, and it goes into the way the country is run and functions. So I always try to maybe cut people some slack and say we find ourselves in this situation because of where we come from. You cannot compare somebody from an underprivileged African country or a third world country has seen poverty. There was somebody put a comment I tried to pin on my last video where I talked about, being trapped here, and he talked about his journey. Oh my God, I was in awe. You cannot compare somebody who has come from a war-torn country, walked across the Sahara, struggled to get to the US or the UK, and compare them with somebody who is immigrating for an experience from Canada to the US to the UK. It's different. It's completely different. So I am very sympathetic, and I understand why people get so aggravated when we talk about not being contented. You say, oh, you have a mortgage and you're being ungrateful, you have a wife. I understand all of that, and I am not being ungrateful. I think that I am blessed, I'm lucky, I'm privileged, but I'm also saying that could I have done things different? And I am not talking for myself. The people in this same country that have decided not to have a home or cannot even afford what I have because I have an okay life, I'm talking for them as well. I'm talking for people who feel like they cannot go back because the families will feel like they're failures, they've come with nothing, but they're not doing anything here because they cannot even really work, they cannot study, and they're just in the systems going that round, conveyor belt, round, like a hamster wheel. and there's no progress. I'm talking for everybody. And what I'm trying to do again is just with a voice from behind, from people. And as I said, I will share. There's some very, very easy ways and business ideas back home that you can do if you find that you're stuck here and you want to go back. And there are also ways that you can plan your retirement to find that sweet spot. But I gave you these scenarios to say that most of us Africans who come here, our countries and our governments have failed us. So we feel like going anywhere. Even when they go to the Middle East, I have stories from people in Dubai who are living in horrible conditions, used almost like slaves, but they rather stay there than go back home, because for home there's no option. They're not sure of 3 square meals. So let's also be sympathetic that we are where the Western world was years ago, before they became civilized and had a system that works, and hopefully we will get there someday. But in the meantime, we can still collaborate together and unite like a continent, and we don't have to only come abroad. There are countries in Africa that are doing well. There's Ghana, and I've heard my Ghanaian people that the president now has removed all visa restrictions for other African countries. They have good opportunities, there are good universities, there's access to education that is not as expensive as coming to Europe or America, where you have student debts. There's this debate that we can go on and on and on, but I just want to say that think out of the box, and before you get yourselves in huge debt, you come here, you cannot settle, you don't even get what you came to get, and you feel like you're trapped, you've made mistakes. Think out of the box first. And if you have any questions, you're looking to come to the UK, I have done a video actually where I shared the best advice that I'll give somebody who is coming to the UK in 2024 or 2025. I'll put that there now, so you should watch that video, and I'll see you in my next video. Thanks again, and it's been Lulu. If you've not subscribed, this is the time to do that, and thanks for your support. My community is growing big and strong. I love you guys, and I don't take it for granted. Like the video, and see you in the next video. Bye bye.